Zimbabwe Defense Forces Day in Zimbabwe, and I can tell you, even the Zimbabwe Defense Forces demonstrated that politically, ZANU-PF it is at a record low. It is marked by divisions, specifically divisions emanating from succession dispute. That is the order of the day between retired General Chiwenga as well as Emerson Mnangagwa. According to retired Lieutenant General Winston Sikauke Mabanga, the military in Zimbabwe still remains by far the kingmaker, and he is also of the opinion that retired General Chiwenga is still in control. In this picture that I put on the portrait, you see Mini Baloyi Chiwenga spraying what may be an antidote on her hands. There is a lot of mistrust within these ZANU-PF comrades, especially if they go to public spaces. And also the statement that I dealt with from Mini Baloyi Chiwenga today regarding that this day was actually mouthful, but they would not speak directly. It requires individuals like us to explain some of the things said. Greetings and welcome to your lovely channel, the Hlonipani Global News. If you are watching us for the very first time, please do remember to press the red or black subscribe button so that next time when we beam live, you become the very first one to watch us. So this is what retired Lieutenant General Winston Sikauke Mabanga penned down after attending the Zimbabwe Defense Forces Day. He says, today as a retired Lieutenant General of the Zimbabwe National Army, I attended Defense Forces Day not merely as a spectator, but as a witness to the enduring soul of our military. The parades, salutes, and fly past are not just ceremony. They are a reminder that the real backbone of the state remains in uniform, in the barracks, and in the quiet discipline of officers and soldiers who have carried this nation through war, peace, and crisis. Standing there among men and women I once commanded and mentored, I saw clearly that while titles changes and offices rotate, loyalty does not evaporate overnight. What does he mean? That while title, it's very, very difficult, especially to seek to erase someone who arose from the junior ranks up to being the commander of the army overnight. It's something that cannot be done. We've seen, of course, the Emerson Mnangagwa faction relentlessly attacking the retired General Chiwenga faction, trying to erase the allies of retired General Chiwenga. As we speak at the moment, there is a plan to actually scatter them around the world so that there is no coordination. So he continues to say, the defense forces still remember who stood with them in difficult moments, who defended their honor, and who led from the front when history demanded courage. Today also confirmed what many insiders already know, but will not say publicly, attempts to weaken or neutralize key military figures through forced retirements. He says, today also confirmed what many insiders already know, but will not say publicly, attempts to weaken or neutralize key military figures through forced retirements, reshuffles, or diplomatic postings have not broken the chains of loyalty forged over decades. The army remains the ultimate kingmaker in Zimbabwe's politics, and the military intelligence department continues to quietly shape the balance of forces behind the scenes. I observed the current crop of commanders and operatives, including those deployed more as political scouts than true leaders. Some are holding mere eggshells positions without real command, officers without genuine respect from the rank and file. They may be tasked to monitor and report on generals perceived to be aligned with Vice President Constantino Chiwenga, but they do not command the hearts and minds of the defense forces. As someone who has served this country in uniform and understands the dictate relationship between ZANU-PF and the military, I left the stadium convinced of one central truth. If ZANU-PF is to be restored to discipline, cohesion, and ideological clarity, it must be anchored once again in genuine liberation values and in leadership that commands real respect in the barracks. That is why I remain convinced that General Constantino Chiwenga is still at the center of the military balance of forces. His historical command over the defense forces, his role in the decisive events of 2017, and the enduring loyalty enjoys among senior officers and MID operatives cannot be wished away by cosmetic changes. On Defense Forces Day, surrounded by the living memory of our struggle, the reality is impossible to ignore. The future of ZANU-PF and the stability of the state will not be decided in press statements or factional meetings alone. It will be decided in how the party aligns itself with the real power base that has safeguarded the nation through every storm. From what I saw today, the center of that power remains deeply connected to General Chiwenga and to those of us who still believe a principled, disciplined, liberation-rooted national project. So this is what retired Lieutenant General Winston Mabanga has penned down. So according to retired Lieutenant General Mabanga, they are, he is of the opinion that Chiwenga still holds, command power. He is still the center of power within the Zimbabwe Defense Forces. Having risen from the ranks of the army, he commands a lot of respect from MIT operatives, from the command structures. And he says those deployed to actually lead the military, but without the support of the military. I think he's referring to the ally of Emerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, and that is Asia Walter Tafumane. I think we have seen that the military does not like the man, and they have exposed that he actually tries to lead the military through the money. That is how Emerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa thinks he can control people. But from the look of things, according to the retired general, Chiwenga still controls some degree of power. There is also something that I saw which almost speak of a different view. Let me just look at this piece of work before I actually close my live broadcast today. And I was just going through it, and I thought it would be quite important. Let me see if I can actually get it, or it will be impossible to. Yes, there is something that is, I saw it in the morning, yes. It says Mnangagwa and Chiwenga power struggle, who holds the military balance of forces. As Zimbabwe celebrates Defense Forces Day today, after Heroes Day yesterday, one of the most critical issues which needs close examination and analysis is the military balance of forces between President Emerson Mnangagwa and Vice President Constantino Chiwenga, as it has a huge bearing on the matrix of power and ZANU-PF's leadership succession issues. Zimbabwe's political architecture rests on the dual foundation of military influence and party hegemony. At the center of this structure is the uneasy power sharing between Mnangagwa and Chiwenga, who have been struggling against each other to control the levers of state power and to outmaneuver one another on succession. While Mnangagwa commands the party structures, constitutional authority of the state and the instruments of power, Chiwenga holds deep-rooted historical loyalty within the armed forces. The military, despite the recent constitutional amendments that confined them to the barracks, is still the power brokers. The army is still the kingmaker. This dynamic creates a delicate internal balance of power between Mnangagwa and Chiwenga. Before the current political power struggle and renewed succession contestation, Mnangagwa and Chiwenga joined forces to oust the late former President Robert Mugabe from power in a coup of November 2017. Mugabe had been in power for 37 years and in charge of ZANU-PF for 40 years. He was deeply entrenched and had cowed his rivals in and out of the party into submission. Mugabe ruled with an iron fist through fierce authoritarian repression and patronage. It took his close allies and enforcers, Mnangagwa and Chiwenga, to remove him through a coup. Mnangagwa had the liberation struggle credentials, political capital and experience, while Chiwenga had a serious wartime record and control of the army. That combination was a perfect balance to form a formidable elite alliance to oust Mugabe from his entrenched position. In his seminal book, The Politics of Authoritarian Rule, Milan W. Svolik argues all authoritarian regimes must resolve two fundamental conflicts. First, dictators face threats from the masses over which they rule, the problem of authoritarian control. Second, a separate challenge arises from the elites with whom dictators rule. This is the problem of authoritarian power sharing. By 2017, Mugabe faced both problems, the people and the military. Crucially, whether and how dictators resolve these two challenges is shaped by context and environment in which authoritarian politics takes place. In a dictatorship, no independent authority has the power to enforce agreements among key actors, and violence is the ultimate arbiter of conflict. Using the tools of game theory, Solik explains why some dictators, for instance, Africa's longest serving leader, Theodore Obiang Nguema Mbasongo of Equatorial Guinea, established personal autocracy and stay in power for decades, and why change in some regimes like contemporary China is far more difficult. He also explains why a country's authoritarian past cast a long shadow over its prospects for democracy, as the events of the Arab Spring in 2011 afterwards revealed. Assessing his argument, Svolik complements these and other historical case studies with statistical analysis of comprehensive original data of institutions, leaders, and ruling coalitions across dictatorships from 1946 to 2008. Svolik says authoritarian ruling parties like ZANU-PF enhance political stability by functioning like a corporate hierarchy. They offer patronage so that junior cadres perform costly tasks for the leaders as they view themselves as stakeholders. This assures cadres have a vested interest in the survival of the regime. However, there is a dilemma. Such regimes rely heavily on the military for authoritarian control, repression of the masses. But this also empowers the army to threaten the dictator via coup. I think this goes to, it was just to rubber stamp. In fact, let me just continue. So Mugabe was removed against that backdrop. as elite cohesion had eroded and broken down. And when the masses joined the army to force him out, but Mnangagwa and Chiwenga were bound to clash over who was in control after the coup. The coup was anchored on a Faustian backing, a pact with the devil. Mnangagwa secured the presidency, but Chiwenga, the architect, traded his military fatigues for a civilian suit as vice president, held the real power. Chiwenga's strength lay in his fierce loyalty network within the Zimbabwe Defense Forces, which he had led for 14 years. For Mnangagwa to survive, he had to systematically dismantle Chiwenga's military backbone and leverage. What followed was a masterclass in political survival, executed through a series of calculated promotions, reassignments, diplomatic exile, and purges. Mnangagwa's first priority was removing commanders who led the troops during the coup. To start with, Chiwenga made things easy for Mnangagwa by swapping military fatigue for designer's suit even before he read the chessboard. However, Chiwenga was also astute about it. He grabbed the vice presidency and retained oversight and control of the army and the war veterans, something Mnangagwa did not want. Kembo Mohati was first appointed as Minister of Defense, Security and War Veterans on November 30, 2017, before being sworn in as Vice President on December 28, 2017. Mnangagwa wanted Defense Minister Ofam Chinguri Kashiri as the other Vice President, not Chiwenga, but Chiwenga extended his influence and grabbed the other position of Vice President, and also seized control of defense and war veterans portfolios from Mohati. Mnangagwa was forced to shift Mohati to National Peace and Reconciliation. The direct brinkmanship and maneuvering had begun and was to escalate into a fierce power struggle and succession battle. Mnangagwa yielded to Chiwenga's demand but bid his time to strike back. Soon after, the clash intensified deadly confrontation. In June 2018, a month before the general elections, a grenade attack shattered a ZANU-PF rally at White City Stadium in Bulawayo. Mnangagwa quickly said it was an inside job, presumably to assassinate him. After the elections, Chiwenga was removed as defense minister and from the war veterans portfolio. Things got worse. Subsequently, Chiwenga faced major health challenges starting around late 2018 and into 2019 amid poisoning claims. He was first airlifted to South Africa for emergency medical treatment in October 2018, but he went back there in February 2019 and again in June, July 2019 before subsequently being transferred to China for specialized treatment. After a miraculous recovery in China, Chiwenga returned home on November 23, 2019, 4 months later. Prior that, in January 2019, Mnangagwa had survived a coup plot while traveling in Russia and Eastern Europe. After surviving the 2019 coup plot and while Chiwenga was away, Mnangagwa's first priority was removing his deputy allies from the police, intelligence, and the army. So, redeployments and purges followed. Spusiso Moyo, the famous face of the coup, who announced the past on state television, was appointed Foreign Affairs and International Trade Minister after being retired from the army as Lieutenant General. Air Marshal Perence Shiri, the late powerful commander of the Air Force of Zimbabwe, was similarly stripped of his military authority and moved to the civilian post of Minister of Lands and Agriculture. Lieutenant General Engelbert Rukeche, a staunch Chiwenga loyalist, was placed in charge of the ruling ZANU-PF party's political commissariat, even though at that point Mnangagwa preferred his ally Victor Matemadanda. Rukeche was removed soon after the 2018 elections and replaced by Matemadanda, who later rather became ambassador to Maputo, Mozambique. He died in June. Mnangagwa removed Rukeche from a strategic position, effectively isolating him from both the party machinery and the barracks. Now, Mnangagwa systematically consolidated and retained power through strategic military reshuffles, retiring pro-Chiwenga commanders and promoting key loyalists to outmaneuver his deputy. He actively stripped Chiwenga of his core military support base to insulate his presidency and clear the path of his term extension. These reshuffles and patronage incentives were designed around a coup-proofing strategy. The army has now been largely put under civilian authority through the recent constitutional amendments that extended Mnangagwa's tenure to 2030. Following Chiwenga's retirement from the army in 2017, Mnangagwa appointed retired General Philip Valerio Sibanda as the commander of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces. Sibanda was elevated as a powerful professional counterweight to Chiwenga's deeply entrenched Zanda faction. Mnangagwa later attempted to bring Sibanda directly into the ZANU-PF Politburo in 2023 to neutralize Chiwenga's influence within the presidium, but the move was blocked as it was unconstitutional. Sibanda officially retired in November last year and was appointed into the ZANU-PF Politburo. Mnangagwa's plan is to later appoint Sibanda, his homeboy, as vice president to replace Kombo Mahati to block Chiwenga. Sibanda has been replaced by another former ZIPRA commander, General Emmanuel Matatu, as ZDF commander. Another critical point of action for Mnangagwa was a retired Lieutenant General Anselm Senyato. Senyato was commander of Presidential Guard during the 2017 coup and a staunch Chiwenga ally. Mnangagwa initially exiled him into diplomacy as an ambassador to Tanzania before bringing him back as Zimbabwe National Army commander amidst political pressure. However, when structural tensions rose and ahead of the March 31 mass stay-away, Mnangagwa abruptly removed Senyato from the military entirely, reassigning him to the politically harmless role of Minister of Sports. That was at the height of the late former war veterans leader Blessed Keza's anti-Mnangagwa campaign, fronting for Chiwenga. The plan was for Senyato to put the army on a leash and allow the masses into the streets to oust Mnangagwa through a popular uprising. Mnangagwa panicked and swiftly removed Senyato to prevent a possible coup. This means Sibanda had now thwarted two coup plots against Mnangagwa, one in January 2019 and another in March 2025. Matatu, a Liberation War veteran, seen as a professional soldier loyal to the head of state, was placed at the apex of the military command to secure the chain of command. Matatu is also Mnangagwa's homeboy and Lieutenant General Aisha Walter Tafmane, a former Central Intelligence Organization CIO co-deputy director and head of the controversial Forever Associates Zimbabwe, was brought to the army to become ZNA commander. Tafmane is now Mnangagwa's pillar of support and strength, placing a hardline military, intelligence and political operative at the helm of the army, insulated the infantry from Chiwenga's influence. Mnangagwa's systematic reshuffling of army commanders highlights a mastery of survivalist statecraft. By executing strategic military transfers, leveraging diplomatic as reassignments and appointing trusted commanders like Matatu and Tafmane, Mnangagwa severed Chiwenga's direct umbilical cord to the armed forces. While Chiwenga remains a powerful figure with latent support in the army, war veterans and individual structural functions. The institutional levers of military force have been firmly put under presidential control. The grand strategy has effectively protected Mnangagwa from the threat of a secondary military intervention, allowing him to stay in power for 2 more years and rewrite the rules of succession from a position of absolute authority. Mnangagwa does not want Chiwenga to succeed him. Ultimately, he has tilted the balance of power in his favor. Only the contingency of death can dramatically shift the balance of forces back to Chiwenga. It also misses the point to some time. I mean, this line of thought, but it was on point in terms of narrating the historical experiences of these 2 warring gentlemen in ZANU-PF. The account is actually on point, except when it comes to making the conclusions. So the really issue of succession in ZANU-PF cannot be solved by what Mnangagwa has done. I think it will take him years to really have firm grip on the military. That is why he is afraid to make some of the decisions, such as to fire retired General Chiwenga, because he understands the consequences of such a decision. Thank you very much for watching us. If you're watching us and it happens to be your first time, please don't forget to subscribe so that next time when we beam live, you become the very first one to watch us. Also take note, I have released my 3rd album entitled Uzodlula by yours truly, Hloniphani Ncube. I've released 3 videos on this platform, and also there is a separate music channel on YouTube. You just search for Hloniphani Ncube Uzodlula, and you will actually get to have the taste of these 3 amazing songs meant to uplift your spirits. Thank you very much for watching us. If you're watching us for the very first time, don't forget to subscribe. You can financially support this channel by pressing the join button and be part of our members who are the heartbeat of this channel. You can equally do so by pressing the thanks button and send us stars. Okay, is signing off. Let me love and leave you. Let's meet on the other side of the live podcast.